people are really interested in this because Liberal were talking about another scheme with superannuation, and Labor, who's obviously won the election, congratulations to Labor, they've actually got this point around the 40% ownership of housing, which is quite interesting. So what are they calling it? It's either the equity scheme or the help to buy, which is what their website calls it. But essentially, for those who don't know, Labor is saying that they will help up to 10,000 Australians each year purchase their house. And they'll do this by either providing up to 40% on new homes or up to 30% on existing homes, where you just need a minimum deposit of about 2%, and then you just need to live in that property as well. Now, they have capped this in Sydney, like towards the main city, it was like $950,000 as a cap. Victoria's main city is $850,000, like Brisbane is $650,000, just to give people an indication of like they're not going to help you buy a $5 million property. So, Charlie, how do you interpret this? When you first heard this, what was the immediate thought that you had and the immediate reaction?
To be honest, I really looked at this and I've gone, so the government is now taking an investment stake in housing.
Yes.
What a right-wing capitalist policy from this government. I find this really, really interesting. So the thing I just want to articulate here, and I'm just going to use round numbers, I realize there's caps. If someone was to buy $1 million brand new home, the government would put in $400,000, the 40%, and the buyer of the home, the first home buyer, and you must be a first home buyer, would put in $600,000, and that's how they would be able to buy $1 million home. But if you sold that, let's say 5 years later, and it's doubled, when you have to give the money back to the government, that $400,000 stakes become $800,000, and you have to give them back $800,000.
Yep.
So this is an investment in housing. So, and again, you've done some excellent research here, Grant, about saying that they're going to, it's like $329 million they're going to put into this policy per year. If I said to you that a company, an international investing company is coming over to Australia and they're going to start pumping $329 million into housing every year for the next 5 years, what do you think was going to happen to housing?
Well, the first thing I'm going to do is buy those stocks. But the second thing is I reckon that the housing prices are going to increase, because what other people will sit there and look at that and go, I'll do the exact same thing. Like that is just a good backing. How many people can actually put in $329 million into the housing market to help it grow? Nobody.
I know this is going to sound really odd. Like I am obviously a property bull. I'm very for property, but I'm actually quite against policies like this. Because I'm like, how do you ever turn it off? Like if you're doing this for the first home buyers now, like, and then you're planning to turn it off in 5 years, what do you do for the next first home buyers that don't have this? So what ends up happening here is these policies, now you've got people that could have only, in this example, afforded a $600,000 house. They're buying $1 million houses. So they're actually going to push up the price of those assets even further. Now, being we're already invested in property, this is probably a little bit, I'm going to say mildly good news, in the idea that I think it'll actually backstop housing in a lot of places. Yep. So the chances of housing going up or at least not falling have dramatically increased in my view. But then the other side of this is I'm also concerned that this might be something that pushes housing up too far and it gets overheated and might be something that leads to future declines.
It's a completely interesting point, because if you think about the second order consequences of this, right, and you go and buy a place, and we'll say it was $1 million just for round figures, right, and then it's doubled. And then you sell and you only walk away with that $1 million difference, where you would probably pay quite a bit off for your debt, etc. You can't get back into the same market, right? So you're now not really selling your property, because to your point, you can't really turn this thing off. When this thing's on, you've got expectation of people who are coming through, getting jobs now, saving for a deposit, etc., and saying, okay, well, now I know what I need to get in order to try and buy a house. And I think that is the biggest challenge, is saying, well, you can't turn it off. And even if you do turn it off, you still need to maintain it in government until people sell their houses, because you still got to double check, get the money back, do all of these things. But then imagine the onslaught that you would have if you pumped $329 million into helping people buy houses, and then the housing market crashed and that turned into not much.
There's some traps here, as we can see. I just think the government has a history of getting involved in housing, and all it ends up doing is pushing up prices faster.
Yeah.
Now, again, I'll put my investor hat on. I think this is a strong bull case for property even further. I think this is a strong bull case for the regions because of those caps. I think many people are going to be buying more in those like major regional hubs. I'm not talking like rural, like out in the sticks. I feel like this is going to be a fuel to all those towns that support the capital cities, and they're going to grow in a really big way from this.
Yeah, I don't. To that point, I don't see this being a huge push for major cities. Like those numbers, I would love to buy a house in Metro Melbourne for $1 million. I would love to, but they're just not there. And so by these caps, which is why it's so important, it's actually indicating as to where this money's going to land. And to your point, those locations is what's going to be propped up.
All right, so we've got a pretty bull case here on like from the investor point of view. This is a really positive sign for property in general. I think we agree on that. I see some negatives down the road. How do you feel about this from a business owner's point of view, though? Is this changing anything in how you might think about doing business?
Yeah, so I was thinking about this. So from a business owner's perspective, the first one is like, where are they going to get the money from? Right, so taxes, welcome. I'm like, oh, great. No worries at all. Let's go and sort of tax some more people. And we know that businesses are always a good target for this. But the second one is employees, right? So I was actually looking at this as a potential benefit for employers because I'm like, well, if my company doesn't require everyone to come into a central business district like a Melbourne or a Sydney, and we are all living rural, and not regional, it's actually a really good thing because then my team can actually get into the property market without being impacted so much by inflation, which has increased their cost of living. And the government is actually going to help them buy houses, etc., which means that the pressure on me as a business owner, in order for me to increase their wages and me cut costs and charge more to my customers, etc., is not as prevalent there anymore because I can actually see this to actually help my team without it costing me too much outside of obviously taxes to go and help pay for it.
So I'll just share one quick story here. I actually know someone personally who got in on the initial trial of this. So they, funnily enough, living on my street, they were renting there, and then I actually saw an ad for this and I sent it to them. Well, I actually sent it to Bianca, my partner, and who sent it to them. And they actually took advantage of this, and it was actually a really great thing. So from what was really interesting to me is like how strong their desire was to own their own home.
Yep.
And I think for someone who's renting and trying to save and the prices keep going up and becoming more unaffordable, this actually really helps give them a sense of security and the option to get into a home and be home proud Australians, which I think is something that was really great for them. So I actually do see some of the positive signs of this, and I think it's going to be great for a lot of first home buyers who haven't been able to get in the market. I think it's a really, really positive thing. As for like the business tailwinds that come from this, one of the things we really note here is like, let's pretend someone's got a house in a region right now and it's worth 500 grand. And this causes prices in those areas to go up to 600 grand. When they sell it to that first home buyer, that person's now made more money that goes into the economy as well.
Yep.
And whether they upgrade or buy a bigger home or things like that. So those second order consequences start to become really interesting. Something that I've been thinking a lot about is just how much wealth is created in Australia because of construction.
Yep.
So you saw that the 40% of this is that, hey, if you build a new home, we'll give you 40%. If you buy an existing, is 30%. So what about all the trade businesses that are now going to be building new homes? Like, I think this is a really, really positive sign for the construction sector and is probably propping up that to a degree as well. So I think if you're in the construction industry or you serve the construction industry, you're likely going to have some more strong years, particularly in those regions, to come from this.
Yeah, especially because so every time that I read this, there was always every year. And there was actually an interview that I watched as well where they're saying that this is just the base and that they're actually looking to increase this as well. And so it's a really interesting point that you made around construction, which I was more looking at this from can people acquire it? But you're completely correct because that industry that sits around construction and growing new townships and expanding existing townships, etc., will continue to grow. And I suspect that this is not going to sit at 10,000 per year. I actually expect, based on the interviews that I've listened to, this is going to grow more and more every single year as well. And so
let's just unpack that a bit further, though. I think it's a really interesting point. So pretend there's like, 10,000 Australians each year. I don't know if they're like, if it's a couple, they're counting that as two and it's actually like 5,000 purchases or whatever it is. But let's just assume it's 10,000 houses the government is going to buy every year now or get involved in this scheme. And let's assume like half of them are new. If that's 5,000 homes that are getting built every year, that's a whole set of trades, whether it's carpenters, electricians, plumbers that are working on those homes. And even if you're not involved directly in the construction industry, well, guess what? Plumbers love to go out for dinner with their friends.
Yep.
So they're spending money in restaurants, cafes. They also buy cars. So your mate who works at the car dealership just made a sale, right? And then like it's all the things that go into that and support it. It's like the ripples of that. So I do see that this is going to make a significant contribution to, again, just like ripple effect of positive economic growth.
Yeah. And the final point to that as well is if I'm only needing to put 2% down for my deposit, I then have available cash to do renovations, to buy more goods for my property and do all of these things, where if I was up against needing to put that whole amount of cash down myself, I really would have probably struggled.
Hey, fellow business owner, if this topic and value-packed short video has resonated with you at all, and you want to dive deeper into being a full stack business owner, check out the full episode by clicking the link on your screen or in the description right now.